What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Overseas Famous podcast. I'm Kevin Owens, joined today by Luke Bonner. Luke is the CEO of a really cool organization. The initials, PWRFWD, but power forward. A huge organization helping give athletes a voice. Very similar thing that we're trying to get across, but he does it in a very unique and awesome way. So we're going to talk to Luke today. Joining us as well, our intern, Matt Kempter. Matt, what's up? Doing good?
Doing good. Can't complain.
Nice. Matt just had a birthday. He just turned 21. So that's going to be big time. Big time going forward, Matt. Life changes.
I remember my first beer.
So we're going to first, Luke, this is a tremendous organization, but let's kind of go in, Luke Bonner obviously played very high level basketball, G League, which we'll talk about overseas. Great career. But the one thing I know your brother, Matt, we were talking before we hopped on. I have an older brother that kind of got a lot of the credit and it used to piss me off. So do you get annoyed with the brother comparisons? Is that something that you get annoyed with as much as I do?
It doesn't bother me that much, to be honest. I don't know why. I think it's because, I don't know, me and my brother we're very similar, but very different at the same time. So I think when I was younger, I was pretty self-aware, I think, for like a sixth grader and stuff. And I realized like this guy, my brother was like getting recruited by everyone, right? Like he was like killing like this like pasty redhead from New Hampshire out of nowhere. And so I mean, we would go to the YMCA and it'd be like, you know, Roy Williams and Coach K and Billy Donovan, like just like sitting in the corner of the gym. And that's when I was like, I'm the luckiest kid in the country because they know who I am, and I'm 12 years old right now, right? Like all these coaches are going to know who I am. So I started getting recruited in like, you know, 6th, 7th grade. I think mostly because schools were trying to get my brother's attention and they thought they could do that by like sending me little letters and stuff like that, but it made me feel really good. So I viewed it as like, this put me in a great position to, you know, to invest in basketball myself and go play somewhere.
It is really, I feel that exact same thing when you were talking about, I remember my brother getting recruited, and I remember he got recruited heavily by Hofstra. Now Jay Wright was the coach at Hofstra back then. And I remember you're like a kid, like I was like a younger kid in, you know, like 8th grade, and he's getting recruited. And I remember thinking how just like, I don't care, like, this is cool, I guess. But I was just sitting there, like Jay Wright's sitting there, you know, talking to my brother, and I'm sitting there like throwing freaking dude perfect shots like all around the gym. And my parents were just like, please stop. Like, please stop. Like they were so annoyed with me because they thought that I was going to ruin a good thing. And that I was like some crazy lunatic, and that they're like, oh, this must be what Jeff was like. But I was legitimately just like, I was like, cool, this is cool. Like, look, we're at a university and I get to shoot on a big, huge arena. That's the only thing that I was thinking of.
Yeah, so my older sister, I'm 5 years younger than my brother, 4 years younger than my sister. I mean, they were both All-Americans. There was no such thing as like McDonald's All-American game for women's basketball at the time, but she was like, you know, Parade Magazine All-American and whatnot. So like same thing, like that's how I grew up. Like summer would come, I would jump in our family's Ford Escort, and we would drive to Indiana to bring Becky to Blue Star All-American and Nike All-American, like starting when she's in like 7th grade. And my mom has like vivid memories of me, like, and I was like a big kid, right? I'm 7 feet tall now. So, I mean, I looked like a grown-up ordering a Happy Meal basically when I'm like 10 years old. But she has these vivid memories of me, you know, like playing with my GI Joes and making all these sound effects on like the wrestling mats, like all over like Gino Ariema's lap, and like all these coaches are there, and I just had like no idea who anyone was. And but like, yeah, that's kind of how I grew up. The fun part, I think, of like being like Matt Bonner's brother, as someone who, he has, you know, red hair. I do not. I have dark brown hair, and I'm a little bit less fair skin. But like always going to his games in like NBA arenas, even college arenas. If you're just like a fan that's there, I think you never expect that like you're sitting next to a family member of someone like participating in that game for the most part. And my brother is someone that was like an easy target for hecklers and things like that. So I used to just love it, like sitting there, and then like people would like, tap me on the elbow, be like, Bonner's a real piece of shit or whatever. And like, like just like getting to hear all that stuff is great.
Yeah, I feel like I've been there where people are heckling my brother, and you get that like defensiveness, but at the same time, you're kind of like, yeah, fuck him. So it's like there's like definitely a bit of just like, yeah, the dude sucks, right? My brother shaved his head his freshman year. He went to University of Pennsylvania, and he shaved his head his freshman year because we were both like horrifyingly skinny kids. So I think my brother's intimidation factor when he was a freshman was like, I'm going to shave my head like I don't know, like stone cold, and then people are going to be scared of me. I don't think it worked because we couldn't grow facial hair until I don't know, like 26 or 27. So it was just this like same thing, fair-skinned bald kid with no muscles, and apparently it worked because he had a pretty good freshman year. But I used to wear like a bathing cap and just be like the Jeff Owens fan club, and I remember people being like, "What is wrong with this kid?" Like the one thing that was the thing that's super cool. You started this organization, and Power Forward, PWRFWD, incredible organization because you really do advocate and create these products that allow the athlete to kind of create their voice. So how do you help like these? First off, take us through how you kind of started this whole entire organization. Like what was the basis for like, hey, this is a great idea. Like we want to give these athletes a chance to showcase themselves in a way that's they can put it on merchandise. They can put it on all these different things.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like a confluence of stuff I had been doing my whole life without like realizing it, if that makes sense. Obviously I played, and I've been super interested in like reforming college athletics and working on like that athlete empowerment side. So I co-founded the College Athletes Players Association, and we attempted to unionize the Northwestern football team back in 2014. Mm-hmm. But that kind of happened because I transferred. I went to West Virginia originally, and I transferred to UMass. Shout out to Kevin Pittsnoggle. We had a great Kevin Pittsnoggle run at my West Virginia team. And so I ended up graduating early because when you're an athlete, you just stay on campus all year. That's all you do, right? And I ended up taking a sport management master's program there, which is like a really good master's program. Like one of my classmates is Kobe Altman, who's now the GM of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I got really into labor law, as a college kid is wont to do, I guess, while playing college basketball. Because I took some sports labor law classes and some college athletics administrative classes, and got super like very eye-opening stuff for someone that was like still playing. Yeah. And I got just like really involved with like that whole movement and doing research on different class action lawsuits that were happening against the NCAA, and basically got really involved on that front and stayed involved. So I kind of have always had this like athlete empowerment thing going. And when I transitioned out of basketball, even at the level I was at, like I had no clue, like where do I exist in the world without playing basketball? Mm-hmm. I don't I couldn't wrap my head around like, what would someone like pay me money to do for them? Like what jobs even are there? Like I didn't know anything about that. I wasted so much time overseas, like watching and rewatching like The Wire and Lost and things like that. In hindsight, I wish I just got like a SaaS sales job or something like that. Like I just got a job that I would get fired from, but like would do something with all that spare time. Because athletes, I feel like when you're in season, you feel like you have no time, but the reality is you have all the time in the world, especially when you're playing overseas and you don't really have friends or anything. Anyway, so I went on from, like, I always had that fear. I ended up working in advertising. So I worked at an ad agency as a 27-year-old intern because I never had a job before. So everyone called me Uncle Intern. So I ended up eventually starting my own shop. And it was before the pandemic hit. I was just like one of the, like an agency that I would run all their like influencer stuff with. We were just like looking at some data on athletes, and we're just kind of like blown away in terms of like like search volume and all this stuff, and how athletes were pretty ill-equipped to capitalize on their audience the way they should. And with the endorsement economy is like a lot more cluttered these days. Like you're not just competing, with LeBron James for a Nike shoe deal. Now you're competing with Travis Scott and Kanye West and all those things. And being like a women's basketball fan myself, I've always seen just like this like discussion on social media of like fans that just don't have access to celebrate their heroes, right? On the women's side. So me and my co-founder were like talking about someone should build a thing where it's like very easy to stand up a personal shop that's also like a digital hub, but you're also part of a bigger thing, so to speak. And then we're like, let's do it. And I had no idea how to start a company like at all. And I completely messed up a lot of that. I'm certain. But we just kind of like went for it. And it turned out that I think I was right. Like we've had pretty significant growth in a very short amount of time. And we've, raised money. I've got 8 full-time employees. I've got 8 part-time employees. And I don't know, it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever worked on in my entire life.
So Luke,
go ahead, Matt.
You said that you tried unionizing the 2014 Northwestern team. How did you guys go behind that? And what made you choose the Northwestern football team?
Northwestern, because it was a private institution in a very labor-friendly area in Chicago. So private institution is governed by the NLRB, that sort of thing. And Kane Coulter, the quarterback there, had been in contact with Ramogi Huma, the founder of the NCPA. And he's basically said he was willing to kind of like testify, basically, which is like the hardest thing to ask a college athlete to do. And then Ramogi called me and kind of told me this. And he's like, we need a third co-founder, basically. Would you be interested in doing this? Because I've been working with Ramogi like on all this stuff for probably like 7 years at that point. And I think I said no at first, to be honest. Because I didn't have a job or anything. I was like, I don't know, dude. Like, is no one gonna hire me? Like what am I gonna like? I'm in New Hampshire. I'm trying to find a job. I just transitioned from basketball. I was about to get engaged. Like I don't have time for this. And then like I thought about it more and was like, I realized like I should probably do this, because like that whole system is relying on you like matriculating out and then being like too caught up in your own stuff to go back and revisit it. But also I was like, how many kind of like chances in your life do you get to be able to make history, right? And if we won, that would have been like historic, and I would have been like part of that. And so I think it still had like a huge impact ultimately to even what's going on today. But that's more or less a story behind how I got involved.
It's fascinating. I do think there's so many similarities when I look at overseas guys, especially. The transition is always the hardest part, and I think what you're saying is exactly what I've gone through, and I'm continuing to go through. We're starting Overseas Famous, kind of this. We're like a year behind, but it's the same thing. Just trying to grow a business where we're trying to help ex-athletes, and I think you're doing it in such a positive way. So I'm definitely going to pick your brain just about it, because I know with me, I'm the same way. I'm just like, okay, I wrote this book. I have a lot of people who are like, okay, because I'm talking about like transitioning from professional sports into just normal life. And I think, we have like a sports psychologist. We have like people to help, resume writing and all these things. Because I think when you're overseas, you're kind of like lost. And I do think what resonated with me was you talking about, I spent so much time. I watched The Wire 100 times, all 5 seasons. I've gone through it. I've watched so many shows on DVD because I was just like, and you think now and you're like, shit, I could have used that time to really build something up, but you don't know at the time. It's just kind of like, you're like just lost. But I think, it's cool to hear you talk about it, because I feel like I'm the same way, and you figured it out. I haven't figured it out yet. But just like
I'm trying,
but it's a scary thing, I think, for ex-athletes to kind of just jump into a business and something that you really are unfamiliar with, and just be like, okay, I'm going to do this. and you're just going to it's a lot of it's trial and error. Like I've already made a ton of mistakes, and it's just something that I'm going to have to get better at and better at. But it's just it's humbling to hear you talk about it, because I can see your business really taking off, and it's so cool. Because we've had Brittany Collins on the show too. Brittany kind of talked about her UMass situation, and the problems she was having with tennis. But I think like the craziest thing, because I love that shirt, by the way, like the free UMass shirt. That's like it's incredible. But the one thing I always wondered, like, how do you help the athletes develop their voice? Like, how do you help them figure out what they want to, what brand they wanted to build? Like, how do you kind of look at them and be like, okay, what are you thinking in terms of whatever product you want to put out there?
So part of this honestly like bleeds into some of I think the phenomenon of transitioning from playing a sport for a living into being part of the real world, is that it's easy to like expect whatever you kind of like know or is super familiar to you can kind of like categorize that as like, oh, that's like easy and obvious, right? Like that's what that is, without realizing like some of that stuff is like unique value, right? That other people just don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of that is like when our team is like helping an athlete kind of like figure out like what story they want to tell their audience, we always like tie it to something bigger than themselves, right? Like, and that's really important. And so like just with our entire business, it's tethered to this concept of how do we give athletes more of an ownership stake in their industry, right? It's like this big freaking thing that we're going after. But then you have to like boil it down to like, well, to get there, we have to start here on this one thing. So we're starting kind of in like this like product merchandise store, right? Build store. And how can we do this in a way that athletes, we're solving a problem for both athletes and their fan bases? Because even at like the level, say you or me are at, right? Like I'm the man in New Hampshire, right? When I was in high school, like everyone knew me. I'm in the paper every day. Like that it's a small state, but that's not nobody, right? And then I go on to play at, in a Big East school or, and then Atlantic 10, like I'm still like I walk into a gym and everyone's like, oh shit, it's like Luke Bonner, he plays college basketball, right? Like even though I was like a mediocre whatever player at like a school that was pretty good, but basically like you kind of build these audiences everywhere you go, but without like activating them, they dwindle away kind of over time, right? Like you lose this connection. So we're trying to build something really like, all right, how can we be a tool so that athletes can take everyone along with them like throughout your entire journey, but also like in a way that the pool also grows along the way. And so when we are working with creating with an athlete, I think we just have a knack to like be able to like talk to athletes in like a way that they'll respond. Not everyone can do that, right? Like I think like a lot of athletes just feel comfortable in telling us what they really are wanting, what they're really about. And then just our team is, I'm not good at it, but like I have people around me that are good at certain things and that can kind of like synthesize that and make it into something amazing. So I think that also kind of gets to the point of what you were talking about with like the fear of like starting a business or how you exist is like, you don't have to know everything, right? Like you just, if you can find your like a space that you're uniquely positioned to occupy, and trust your instincts in finding, people who can do the stuff that you can't, that will allow you to build something. I feel really lucky. I almost feel like I fell into this. Like I just, like when I think about it, I'm like, oh shit, like I am literally the best person on the planet to be sitting in this position. And I believe that. And I'm usually not that like confident of a person, I guess. And I think that being able to like realize that myself and have that level of conviction has allowed us to continue to exist.
It is super cool. And I do think there's so many, I mean, athletes in general, when you kind of walk away from your athletic career, there's just so much uncertainty. And I love that you're grabbing athletes like when they're still going and building their brand, especially like athletes that don't get the credit. You have a lot of WNBA players, female athletes that don't get the same credit, and you're building this platform for them to show and brand themselves while they're still relevant. Because I think that's the hardest thing, is staying relevant. I mean, I'm 10 years retired from basketball. I wrote this book and released it, but it's hard because I'm not relevant anymore. Like you said, back in the day, I would walk into, places and be like, oh shit, there's Kevin Owens. And now it's just like, oh shit, that guy's tall. So it's a
guy's got a sweet beard.
Yeah, like nice beard, buddy. Like, oh my God, it's a lumberjack. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like, but I'm Kevin Owens. And they're like, I have no idea what that means. The wrestler? Like, that's super cool. You look a lot different. But I do think that it's great to kind of create that and keep that relevance going with athletes. But the one thing, like, how do you choose those athletes? Are the athletes coming to you, or are you the one who's kind of being like, all right, this guy's got a good story to tell, this girl's got a good story to tell? Are they coming to you, or do you kind of choose those athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. We're still a pretty young business, so there's a lot of athletes kind of discovering us as well. But the thing about the sports space is, especially if you're a player, it's really small. It's very hard to get into, I think, but understanding who all like the people are, is I just know everyone because of how I grew up. Like, I don't know any other way to put it. And I understand kind of like, who all the people are that, and the best way to kind of like go through proper channels with athletes to not get in trouble with anyone, and just like how to handle all that. So yeah, I mean, that's basically how we have operated. I would say there was definitely a focus for us, just getting started up on basketball, because it's the best sport. No, because those athletes are the most visible, and we do a lot of like when we say like athlete merch, a lot of the stuff that you see, I think, on our platform, I don't think you would classify as like merch. It's more, I don't even know what, like, this is more like streetwear and statement pieces and things like that, right? And so there was definitely a focus on NBA, particularly WNBA athletes, because if you look at like any of like the major trends, I think, in like all the sports leagues, they pretty much have all started 2 years previously in the WNBA, from like taking a knee to like pregame drip, all that stuff basically starts with the WNBA. So that was like kind of like a huge focal point. I mean, it's a passion thing for me because just my experience, watching my sister and knowing that world really well. Yeah. But I just also think it's like a good like category for business, to be frank. Right now it's like a really fast growing space.
So when athletes come to you, do you like say to any athletes like, hey, we're not really interested in working with you? Or is it kind of just like an open field of whoever wants to work with us, we want to work with them?
Yeah, I mean, so we have like a team in place, basically. So if anyone comes to us, they'll get relayed to someone on my team, who will do like kind of like an intake process with them. And we only have so many resources ourselves. So if we feel we cannot effectively like help an athlete, we will provide like, here are ways that you can still get on the platform. And we've had a really good success rate with that. But like the reality is, like, right now we can't help everyone yet. We're building like behind the scenes to be able to do that. But for the meantime, I don't think that we say no per se, but we try to kind of like provide guidance on like how we could effectively, or how an athlete could effectively utilize the platform.
How much easier is it now to work with athletes with the new NCAA image and likeness rules?
That's been pretty interesting. knew that was coming. So it's almost like, it's like a funny, like NIL is like such a buzzword now, right? Like there's like a million, like we're an NIL startup. And it's like, well, where were you 10 years ago? Like, when all this is going on. We started our business with pro athletes, but obviously knew the NIL stuff was going to happen eventually. When we started, everyone was like, NIL could happen as early as 2022, right? And then it's like, well, it can now happen as early as 2021, and it was kind of like, holy shit, like, yeah, that could happen, I guess. It's still very much like a Wild West situation, I would say. We're very deliberate when we work with college athletes, and we do have college athletes on the platform. But I feel like if you're going to get into that realm, walking through agreements, and being willing to talk to them about kind of like what's going on, and being willing to talk to like compliance or whatever. We're very, like, I guess, like, deliberate on that front. So, it's been interesting, right? Like, I think the expectations are all over the place in terms of like college athletes, but a lot of the college athletes we've worked with have been like amazing, right? Like there's so many amazing athletes out there. And when that started, everyone's like, well, this is only going to impact the top 1% of the athletes, right? Like the Zion Williamsons of the world. But what you're seeing is like, I mean, it's not a shocker, like, but by saying that, you're essentially saying like the other 99% of zero value, which is complete bullshit. And so like, that's been like the really cool thing is like, we've built all these relationships with these college athletes, and I'm going to be more invested in kind of like watching their seasons than I have in a long time. So
I do think that you talk about like building that community. It's so important. That's like the one thing that I feel like has been the most rewarding part of this whole entire process. Like we started this podcast. We started kind of the business like slowly, where we're helping guys kind of behind the scenes, but we started the blogs and things to just give these athletes a voice. Like, tell us what's going on overseas. Like, that's the big thing. Like, no one really knows. It's such, like you talked about, there's so much uncharted territory in college. It's the same thing with like overseas. So you're just kind of like the wild west. Like, you played there, it's like crazy how some of these things kind of go down. And I think that's the one thing that we're really trying to do, is just like branch out and be like, okay, let's build this community. And I think that's what you're talking about with you. It's like you're building this great community where you're there to help athletes really, really help themselves in the future. And I think it does, when you're talking about college and like compliance and stuff, it's tough to have an 18-year-old kid pick a brand, pick something that they're really believing. Because like at 18 years old, like I don't think there was anything that I really believed in besides, there's like, I mean, obviously I could say something and one of my producers who's a woman would fucking kill me. But like there's things that I believed in at that time, and that none of them had to do with like movements or anything. I just like basketball and boobs and like things like that. Like those are like the most important things to me. So having that, I think it's
into calzones when I was 18.
Yeah, like there's like, yeah, like what's my favorite? What are the best wings in the area? Those are like the things I'm thinking of. So like to have like something where you're putting it on the
but also like understanding that that's okay, right? Like you're going to evolve, and if you're so caught up in, and this is something we work on a lot too, is like it doesn't have what you put out to the world, like isn't the end of it, right? Like you can do something else. Like if you put it out and people don't buy it, what's the harm, right? Like you can do something or don't connect with it. As long as you feel proud of it, like that's like the main thing, right? And so I would say like part of that is like, it doesn't have to be you don't have to hit every mark, right? Like every single time, but is there some, piece of the puzzle you can address, through engaging with your fans through Power Forward, basically. It's kind of like what we do a lot of times. And sometimes it's bigger, like this is like who I am. This is my statement. And I want to just keep hitting people over the head with it. So it really depends.
Luke, this has been awesome because the one thing that we're kind of on with right now is the series of just kind of, you know, those ex-athletes who became entrepreneurs, who created these incredible things and these incredible things that create voices for athletes. And that's a huge thing. And I love what you're doing with Power Forward. I love how big it's getting. I love the t-shirts. Like I peruse through. And if you guys, we're going to put the link and stuff on like under what I'm saying right now. That's what producers do. But I was just perusing through all the different athletes and the different shirts and the different things that you guys offer. And they're just cool too. Like you said, they're like statement pieces, but like sometimes it's cool just to like rock something. Like I'm like really into just random t-shirts. Like I've like I made a t-shirt that said, like, I was like, I saw there's a t-shirt with Bigfoot. Now I'm like 6'10". So I was like, I need a shirt with Bigfoot on it. And it was given like the peace sign. And then I just made the words and I said, like, there's dozens of us. And like from Arrested Development. And I was like, this is going to be a great t-shirt. And like every time I wear it, people are like, where did you get that? I was like, well, I made it completely by myself because it's just me stupidly. But like, I love stuff like that, like the t-shirts and stuff that you guys offer, like the free UMass is incredible. I just think there's a lot of great ideas. And for you guys to be able to put that together is just such a unique experience and great for athletes to really share all of these things. I think it's just tremendous what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, at the core of sports, right, there is like a communal experience, even for individual sports, right? So, I mean, that's part of it too, is like on our platform, your shop is uniquely yours, but you're also part of something bigger. And so that's something that's been like really interesting to see. You know, I have access to some of the data, but seeing like some of the multi-athlete checkouts is like really surprising sometimes, like to see like who people are like buying from in one checkout.
It's fun too, just to, and we're athletes, like we played, but I do think like I'm so disconnected in terms of, you know, it's been a while. So I feel like sometimes when I talk to guys who play overseas, like I'm 41 and these guys are like 22 and I'm like, hey man, what's up? And I'm like, oh Jesus, am I like the old guy? But it's like that community, that connection is really cool. So it must be cool to kind of watch, you know, like watch an WNBA game and be like, oh shit, you know, I know this person. I know this person. I worked with this person. We're designing this for this person. That's kind of cool to keep that relevance to the game, just almost as like a human being who played, just to have that relevance still.
Yeah. I mean, just even what you just said, it's like my brother played in Italy his first year out and you didn't have internet, right? Like, and I'm just like trying to imagine like that experience compared to like now, right? Like where you still can stay connected at least through that with people back home. But
I like laugh every time I look at just there. I'll like go on a site and there's like a full game like highlight package from like a guy who plays overseas. And I'm like, shit, like it's just incredible. Like the teams are doing so many things. They have so many social media. And like I go and look through film from like 11, 12 years ago and it's like grainy. There's no zoom in. There's no like, it was just some guy filming from like the top of the bleachers just so we could watch it after the game. And I'm like, this is crazy. Just how much technology has changed over the course of the past, 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my tail end, my wife now, who I was dating at the time, was able to like stream my games from Lithuania, but we also got better. So maybe that was part of it while I was over there. But no, I mean, that whole experience, right, of going over there is just like, I mean, I only did it for 3 years and it felt like an entire lifetime. Like you're there for 9 months. People think you're in this fun study abroad thing or something like where you get to party, but it's like, no, I'm doing 2-a-days with a Serbian coach who's out of his mind and thinks I'm going to jump higher at 27 years old. And then I'm going to come home with some money in my pocket and no address and basically hang out with friends and then go back and never unpack my suitcase because I don't know if I'm going to get fired or sent to another team at any given point in time. And that's like I got to a point where I just realized like that was like having a huge like strain on like me and I had to get out of it. Cause like, you make you make decent money, but it's not like you're making like you're set for life money or anything. And here comes my son interrupting us in his underpants.
Dada.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I love it.
Whiteboard marker.
You can't find a whiteboard marker?
No.
Okay.
I got my new school one, but it does not work.
Well, I'll come down and find it for you in a minute.
Hi.
All right.
So adorable.
Dad.
I'll be right there.
I do love, like, I have, with girls, like, it's completely different. So like when girls are walking, like my girls are walking around the house, like I just think I wish that I could have those boys where you can just walk around shirtless and just be like, let's go. Like now it's just a different world.
Oh, my daughter does it too.
Well, Luke, this has been super cool having you on, talking about your business and just talking about what you went through to kind of grow this business and become an entrepreneur, which is super cool, and just your experience overseas as well. We're super excited to have you. We're psyched for your business. We're going to be following. We're big fans, and we appreciate your time today.
Appreciate it. Take care, guys.
Take care, Luke. Thank you so much.
See you.
See you.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks.
Good times, Matt. I do like Power Forward. I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
And
I was just looking at the stuff that they do. It seems like really interesting. Seems like they have a lot of potential, especially with like the NIL stuff, to get after these college athletes to really help them like promote their brands.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been hearing so much about it, like, just on Twitter and stuff. And then I reached out to Luke and I was like, this is super cool. Cause I think, it's a similar thing, helping athletes, but obviously what we're doing and what they're doing are very different paths, but it's nice to kind of, collaborate and talk a little bit about, what Overseas Famous could be and what we could turn it into. And it's nice to just kind of hear from another ex-athlete who's just kind of like in the same position as me. Like, I'm just going to jump and hopefully this works out. So it's been fun.
Something I thought was interesting too was how he said a lot of the trends start in the WNBA and then they move out to other sports. And I'm wondering why that doesn't translate to more viewership. Yeah.
It's unfortunately, I feel like the WNBA has such good marketing, and I think the WNBA has such good smart people in there who are trying to build the brand. So these athletes are doing these things and wearing these things and building it, but it's almost taken and then like, oh, we're going to do this with the NBA. It's like that idea is taken and brought to like a higher scale. And it's almost like they don't get the credit that they deserve when they are the ones kind of creating this content, creating these different things. But it's almost like that minor league system almost, which is unfortunate to be like, oh, look what they're doing down here. Here, do it up here. And we're going to make even more money, which I guess the WNBA is the NBA as well. So when people were like, oh, well, the WNBA loses so much money, the NBA makes so much money, they're paying for it. Like, you see those little things that the WNBA is doing that are building that growth. The NBA is taking it. Just because they took it doesn't mean the WNBA gets credit. So I do think that there's some really smart people there. There's some really obviously talented individuals, talented women who are busting their ass. And
and you can see that by how much women's basketball has improved in the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, you can see it by just not even in America. If you go look at like the women's USA team, they used to absolutely kill everybody. And they're still killing everybody, but the games are getting a lot closer, and the foreign teams the women look a lot closer to the American women in skill set wise and athleticism. It just seems like they're getting a lot more advanced. Yeah, like the Australian team, I know there's quite a few. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of women over time who built that Australian program, but now it's like a lot of those Australian girls play in the WNBA and are stars, like all stars in the WNBA. So, you have you have like, just teams are catching up. I think it's kind of what the transition the NBA went through in like the early 2000s when all that European drive just started going up. It just makes basketball better, because I think the USA Dream Team was destroying teams, and then everyone kind of got better, and it made the USA basketball. And now basketball is just keeps on getting better because now you're competing with the world. And you wonder if like the work that the NBA is doing in different countries, if women are kind of seeing this and be like, hey, I kind of want to play basketball. Like, I'm pretty tall, I'm pretty athletic, and they start picking it up at a younger age. You wonder if since they're not doing it for women right now, maybe they're just picking it up just by seeing it.
I think too, like there has to be so much growth. I feel like watching, if you're watching like even soccer and you're seeing how much coverage, women's soccer and women's sports are getting, it might drive to basketball too. Like I think about like how big the women's soccer, like I know every single player on the U.S. women's national team. And it's like most people, their household names, Megan Rapinoe, Carly Lloyd, Alex Morgan, they're household names now. And it's like, even like girls who are just like, didn't want to play a sport before are kind of like, there's more women who are like, I'm not afraid to play a sport. And especially in other countries too, the empowerment of women is awesome because now they're like, fuck this, I'm playing. Like, you're not going to tell me that I can't play. And I think it's huge, and it's building the women's movement, which I love to see because, obviously with my little one coming up, it's nice that she's getting into a time period where women's sports are going to be like put in the forefront.
And the parts that's amazing to me is, like you said, how popular the women's soccer team is here, but not the basketball team. And basketball in America is probably the most popular sport for kids. And it's just like really surprising how more people know women on the women's soccer team than the women's basketball team, even though basketball is vastly more popular in the United States.
I think it's obviously stemmed from like that 99 women's World Cup champion team where like United States, like I feel like we were used to winning sports. Like, so like even the women's team, you're kind of like used to, like there's no competition, but like when you're playing soccer, like we always sucked at soccer. Like we're not a soccer nation. And then when they went and won the World Cup, it's like, we're the best at something that we shouldn't be the best at. And I think that just built the interest, and people are like, a lot of the girls that are playing now credited that team to like, that's why I wanted to play soccer. I watched them, and that's what made me driven to want to play for like the women's national team. And I think it's just the growth and like the talent level has improved so much, but just like being good in a sport that you shouldn't be good at. I think like basketball, like everyone's kind of like assumes that we should be the best at it. Mm-hmm. And
we come into the tournament expecting to walk away with that gold, expecting to win the championship.
It's like if like when a shitty team or like a team that's not supposed to win, like I look at it as like
a couple years ago.
Yeah, like those wins are almost bigger. Like teams like even like as a Philadelphia fan, like that 2008 Phillies team, they weren't really supposed to win. And all of a sudden it's just like this miracle run that same with like 2017, the Eagles. You're like, Carson's down. They're not going to win. And then they win. It's like that builds it even more and helps the growth even more when you're not supposed to win and then you kind of go. So I think like the women's soccer really took off from there. And hopefully basketball continues to keep up. And, they get pushed more. And I think it takes them losing in a big tournament to be like,
you wonder what's like that push that makes it like, it's most likely not going to be as popular as the NBA just because the NBA is a giant dinosaur right now. Like it's hard to take it down. One of maybe the most popular sport in the world, fighting football right now. But you wonder where like the WNBA is going to, or when the WNBA is going to make that push to be one of the most popular women's sports, like that's professionally watched.
Yeah, I do think I think it's going to take the women losing. I think if they lose, whoever beats them or any other country is going to be like, oh shit, we have a shot. And then the USA is going to be like, we lost. How are we going to get better? And it just like builds this whole story that now everyone wants to be involved in. And I think that's cool. Mm-hmm. So thanks again for Luke Bonner for joining us today. Thanks, Matt, for hopping on and talking a little bit about Power Forward. Great company, helping athletes share their voices. This has been the Overseas Famous Podcast. I'm Kevin Owens, Matt Kempter. We'll see you guys next time. Later.